All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. Just a bookkeeping item. Everyone is on mute. So if you are interested in asking any questions towards the end, please put them in the chat and we will make sure to get towards it as soon as the presentation is done. All right. Well, we don't want to punish anyone for being on time, and we understand everyone must be extremely busy today. So, Elliot, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, welcome everybody to this webinar. We're grateful for My Financial Coach and AAPL's partnership. I'm Elliot Jones. I am with AAPL, the Director of Marketing here. Glad you all could join us. I'm going to turn it over to Empo. We're excited about our partnership that we've had now for well over a year and continue to produce great things through that. So I'll turn it over to Empo and he can introduce our speaker as well.
All right, thank you, everyone. So my name is Enpo Tu. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at My Financial Coach. And what we are able to offer for our AAPL listeners out there is our membership fee-based financial planning. And what that often means is we're helping individuals make really tough life decisions around their finances, but also, very excited for opportunities. So for a lot of our listeners out there who either work directly with the new student graduates, or perhaps you have a fellowship program that you're running, just know that you are not alone when it comes to the financial resources. And My Financial Coach is able to provide everything from cash flow analysis, liability management, and goal setting throughout all phases of someone's life. But something that we find that comes up time and time again, and in a growing severity, is student loans. And when we talk about student loans, we're oftentimes talking about navigating a bunch of federal programs. We're talking about maybe some private loan ideas. And so what we had to do was help our clients figure out, hey, what are some of the life decisions we have around that? But also, what are some of the tangible solutions? Should I refinance? Should I try to qualify for certain federal programs? And so we've actually went out there to the marketplace of ideas and found what we call our subject matter experts. And these are firms that hold themselves up to very high ideals and similar ideals to the ones we have at My Financial Coach, but are able to guide our clients through those decisions and then get them to that solution set, whether it's refinancing or whether it's going in there and trying to qualify for these programs. So I've had it's my pleasure to say that I've worked with Chris a number of times with some of my physician clients, whether they are in leadership or whether they are surgeons. All of them have benefited from Chris's insights. So Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and the topic today?
Thank you, Enpo. Thank you, Elliot. So Chris Pfanstiel, we have a small firm in Pittsburgh that specializes in working with doctors and naturally in doing that work. You get really good at understanding the way taxes affect investments, the way creditor protections work, or insurances work. And of course, the most common problem that physicians have coming into the story is student loans. So what I'll do today is I'll run through the PowerPoints we've prepared. As we run through the PowerPoints, any and all questions I ask, place them in the chat as we get through. Then towards the end, Cheyenne we'll start reading those questions out, and we'll make sure we get answers to everybody. If there's one or two that go offline or that are personalized, feel free to enter that directly in the chat and we can take that offline. We'll talk through student loans, we'll talk through mortgages and several of the financial decisions folks make, not just the loan itself, but so what are physician mortgages, how are those different? Talk through credit scores, investments, and insurances. So you guys can picture all of the financial decisions that physicians are making at early career stages. But I want to start by asking you to kind of put yourself in the shoes of a physician maybe entering or leaving residency or fellowship, and bear in mind, on average, they're coming in with well over $260,000 in student loan debt. So that places a financial cloud pretty quickly over everything that they're thinking about. We also want to help folks understand that as they prepare to deal with that student loan, they're also being told you have to worry about creditor protection. You have to spend a good chunk of money every year on insurances to protect your income and to protect from disability and what have you. They're being told that they face higher tax rates, right? And they're being told that maybe they're starting to invest later than their friends who became accountants or engineers. So they already know that there's some elements of uphill battles. Now the physician income certainly helps, but it adds some responsibility to make sure they're using it prudently. When we talk about student loans, which is per the agenda where we're starting, right? Talk about student loans, early career physician basically has three choices. So they'll go through residency, fellowship, transition to life as an attending or in a practice, knowing about forbearance, knowing about public service loan forgiveness, and then knowing about working through private banks, right? Those are usually the three courses of action that they're going to think about. We'll explore each of them today, and then we'll talk through how they make that decision. Do I save money? Do I pay off my loans? Or how do I balance those? And quite frankly, what rules do I follow? So if I'm going to do one of them, how do I do it right? So forbearance is the first thing we'll talk about. Forbearance is almost never the answer that fits. And I'll explain a few of the government programs and why forbearance is probably not the answer. But I just want to make sure we're defining it for everybody. When I talk about forbearance today, I'm talking about forbearance that you request. So if you request forbearance, what you're doing is you're telling the servicer that due to some financial hardship, job loss, whatever it might be, I had a client have triplets join his intern year, and that would be a big financial change, right? So there could be reasons where someone might wish that they just didn't have a bill show up. And so when you ask for forbearance, you're asking them not to bill you. If they don't bill you, you can't miss a payment, plus you don't owe a penny, right? So forbearance is a way to protect your credit and have no cash flow obligation on your federal student loans. When you're in a forbearance that you specifically request, you're not building any months or credit towards public service loan forgiveness. You're not building credits towards the long-term loan forgiveness, the 20 or 25-year loan forgiveness programs either, and interest can still accumulate. The difference, and I'll talk about some government updates, if you hear a hot button right now issue is that a lot of physicians are having their loans put into an administrative forbearance, which is a lot like the forbearance that existed during the CARES Act from the beginning of the pandemic until basically last year. In that time period, forbearance had a different set of rules. We'll talk about that shortly. But if you request forbearance, no payment due, no effect on credit score, but no credit towards loan forgiveness, public service, or long-term. And like I said, you're not necessarily avoiding any interest accumulation. In the public service loan forgiveness programs, these are, I would say, the place where there's the biggest mystery box, the most unknowns. So I'm just going to start with the rules themselves. We'll get to how to navigate these and do a terrific job. But the rules themselves. Public service loan forgiveness, we want to be working for 120 months. These do not need to be consecutive. So working for 120 total months, nonprofit jobs or government jobs. We have to be 30 hours a week. So if you're part of the administration or the institution, 30 hours a week can become an interesting definition. I would argue a doctor's car is in the parking lot, even if they're a 0.6 FTE. Their car's in the parking lot for more than 30 hours a week. But you will find some institutions that say that's not a 30-hour-a-week position, right? So we want to be careful about how we define 30 hours a week and be on the same page as the administrator and as the employed physician with what a 0.7 contract, a 0.6 contract might actually mean in terms of hours per week and how it works towards public service loan forgiveness. But that 30 hours a week is a requirement. It must be signed off on by the employer that the physician or the nurse or whoever else is in fact working 30 hours a week there. And then their payments need to be in one of the qualifying payment programs. Revise pay as you earn is become save. You'll still see a lot of files that say revise pay as you earn though. So revise pay as you earn or save is a qualifying payment plan. Pay as you earn is a qualifying payment plan. ICR, IBR, and then the standard repayment itself can qualify towards PSLF. The loans must be federal. Used to be they had to be a MyFed loan, and then it was Mohela. Now you're going to see Ed, but right now a lot of those loans are at Mohela, and they were recently the only folks servicing the program. You'll find that Ed Financial is going to be doing it here soon. We want to bear in mind with these loans that public service loan forgiveness for a lot of providers, if they're in the nonprofit setting, is the cheapest way to get out of their loans. There are some misconceptions out there that if your loans pass this eyeball test, or the average loan balance compared to the average income over the 10 years in the system is therefore, if the loan balance is bigger, then PSLF is better. If the loan balance is smaller, it's not. There's some sort of flaw to that eyeball test. I'm going to say for almost every doctor, if they're in a setting, it's nonprofit, public service loan forgiveness is the cheapest way out of federal loans. And I'll talk through payment caps and why I don't like that eyeball test shortly. And the other big pro of it is, quite frankly, it protects your credit score, right? This loan gets forgiven tax-free, and there's no effect on your credit score. So if we can find a way to get through 120 payments using income-based repayment systems, income-driven repayment systems, if we can do that over a 10-year period and we can get residency to count, fellowship to count, then there's a really strong chance that PSLF saves money. We want to be aware that if we are talking about PSLF, we are not talking about the 20-year forgiveness program, and we're not talking about the 25-year forgiveness program. When those loans are forgiven, particularly after the sunset of the Tax Cut Job Act, when those loans are forgiven, there is an income tax due at the end. If you have a private loan forgiven, there's an income tax due at the end. So PSLF is very specifically the one that helps nonprofit employers the most with their recruiting advantages, because it's a tax-free forgiveness and the money's not coming out of their budget. Now, I'll tie a couple compensation considerations in a few minutes, but we want to be aware 20 and 25-year programs are different. If you're in a rural part of the country and the physicians are getting additional loans forgiven or forgiveness because they're in an underserved market or a rural part of the nation, then that other loan forgiveness isn't like double loan forgiveness. They just get a smaller loan forgiven from PSLF, right? There's no need to capitalize on 2 or 3 loan forgiveness programs at a time. So in PSLF, a few key government updates. If your loan servicer can't quite keep up with your data, you're put into what's called an administrative forbearance. That's the same forbearance type program that was in place during the CARES Act. So what we'll want to note is administrative forbearances very clearly do count towards PSLF. So I received an email from a client yesterday that was saying, basically, I feel inclined to start making payments. I'm in administrative forbearance and my servicer's not getting back to me. They're confused when I call in. Can I just start making payments? It's like, you can do whatever you want, but if they're billing you $0 and it counts towards PSLF, you're spending money you don't need to spend. You'd probably rather your family keeps that money for themselves, right? So education around administrative forbearance is important, because that's different than the forbearance that you request when you're running into a problem. The first thing. Second thing, the timelines. Timelines have changed every several months since 2020. As of today, it's not until this fall that folks need to go into their loans and update their income. And then when they update their income-driven repayments get recalculated. So there's still probably going to be room for families that didn't file their tax returns yet and maybe didn't show that they went from being a resident or a fellow last year to an attending in the second part of the year, or maybe they did that 2 years ago and they didn't yet file their tax return that shows they were an attending for the whole year last year, there's still probably room for those folks to live on tax extension, to go through an income-driven repayment verification, to lock in low payments for another 12 months and make PSLF that much cheaper for them. Obviously, we're not going to advocate for anyone to file their tax returns after October 15th. But if folks are on extension and haven't gotten through that filing yet, they may still be able to make payments off their most recently filed return, being the one showing their earnings from maybe year 2022. So there's still some room with the postponement of income verifications to this fall, still some room to maybe get creative isn't the best word, but to strategically postpone the return until after updating your income in the system, lock in a low payment for 12 more months. I also want to be clear that in government update, the pay-as-you-earn program is going to be going away. So pay-as-you-earn, which came out, that would have been Obama's first term, pay-as-you-earn came out, that payment is going to be sunsetted this summer. Now, why that matters is of the two programs that offer a cap or a ceiling to what the physician might have to pay on their student loans, of the two that offer a ceiling, pay-as-you-earn is significantly cheaper. So if a physician, let's say, has $100,000 of student debt and they sign a contract making $400,000, the income-driven repayment that physician might make is, a few grand a month. If they have to do that for 5 or 6 months, or 5 or 6 years, excuse me, then ultimately they repaid the loan and never benefited from PSLF. That math is why a lot of folks think if you have a small loan and a big income, this doesn't work. However, if you're in pay-as-you-earn, and there are other programs as well, but pay-as-you-earn being the one I want to highlight right now, if you're in that program, then your payments, when it goes through that income-driven repayment formula, the payment hits the ceiling of never exceeding the 10-year amortization schedule of the loan or standard repayment. So if someone has low payments for even 1 year of residency and then 9 years on the 10-year amortization schedule, they're basically avoiding paying 10% of their loan back. If maybe they had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of low payments as a resident or fellow, then they're going to get the vast majority of their loan forgiven, even if they have significantly higher wages than they do loan balances. So the fact that pay-as-you-earn ends this summer does create a to-do list for a lot of physicians, particularly those finishing training right now. They should be aware of that, get into the program, and make sure that they lock in a low payment using their residency or fellowship wage before their income would take them over the cap, and certainly before that program goes away. So important government update there as well. Student loan consolidations have long been a question mark. If you work with residents and fellows and they were to consolidate their loans right now, the incoming PGY1s, if they consolidated their loans right now, they would enter repayment. If they enter repayment, we'll talk about why that can be good. Their payments might be based on last year's tax return if they knew to file one in med school. A lot of med students don't know to file one. But if someone has federal student debt and they file a tax return as a med student, 0 times everything is 0. Med students typically have 0 income. They're going to lock in their first year of student loan payments for $0. If you think about making 120 payments, wouldn't you like at least 12 of them to be 0, right? Instead of 12 to be 2,000, 4,000, whatever a month when you're out of training and earning significant wages. So I bring up consolidation because it's a great thing to do when you're finishing med school and entering training. When you are in training from now until the summer, consolidation is not so bad But through training and as an attending, if you consolidate loans after July of this year, if you consolidate loans, the loan payment history used to vanish. Then for a little while, it was adopting the loan history of the best loan. So all your loans kind of got to borrow that old history. Now it's going to become the weighted average history of all the loans. So somebody might have loans that are 100 months towards forgiveness and loans that are only 10 months towards forgiveness. A consolidation is going to make the 10-month loans farther along and the 100-month loans not as far along. So we want to be very careful about consolidations. There was a time period when you would never do it. Then there was a time period when you would always do it. And now it's a maybe. So we don't want to remember what we did for ourselves a year ago or 2 years ago and ever give that advice to some of these physicians. We want to know these rules changed and changed quickly. So lessons learned in the past may not apply today. We also want to be clear that we're encouraging physicians to submit their employer certification forms each and every year. Now, if you've been part of administration for a while, you're probably used to them bringing a PDF into the office and saying, I need you to sign that I worked here. That program has moved all online. You can get the PDF still, you can submit it, but there's messages everywhere saying, please do this online, please do this online. So if folks are bringing that form in, it's going to be cleaner from a processing standpoint once they submit it, if they do the online process. So you'll want them to do the online process for your own workflows, but the physicians are going to want to do the online process also for faster processing times, less errors. So those forms are moving online, which I think is going to be a big win. And then we want to talk about how these physicians might file taxes and claim their children. Both pay as you earn and save allow a physician to file a tax return that excludes a spouse. So maybe there's a couple and one went into family medicine, finished their training in 3 years, started making a couple $100,000. And maybe one is going to advanced fellowship to be an EP cardiologist. Well, along the way, if they both have federal debt, how they file their return is going to decide what percentages of each of their income are going to be applied to what student loans. And so there's oftentimes conversations around, should I be filing a tax return separately or jointly with my spouse? If one has student loans and one doesn't, a lot of times we're talking about filing separately. And then there's a question of, if I file separately, who claims the children? And then there's a question of the timing of the tax return. Most physicians that are repaying their loans have their tax returns automatically pulled by their loan servicers to determine their income-driven repayment. So if I every May have to have my income recalculated and then my income-driven repayment recalculated to determine what it costs me to get through my next 12 months of income-driven repayments towards PSLF, if every May I have to do that, and I just went through a big pay raise, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm going to wish that I was on tax extension, right? If you can pay one more year as a resident, you would want to. If you could pay a year after that as a resident half-time and attending half-time, again, you would want to. So I think it's really important to know there's a key conversation around how to file, who claims children, and then when to file a tax return. You're not going to give advice or talk to folks about filing after October 15th, but filing a tax extension, particularly if they've paid their estimates or have their wages withheld appropriately, that can really go a long way to protecting their loan payments and keeping them low. Remember, PSLF, the loan gets forgiven no matter how much money is left. So anything you can do to reduce your spend and then have the rest forgiven and forgiven tax-free is a win. So these are all things that are worth considering that helps keep that money in the physician's own pocket, their family's pocket, put it away to pay for their own kids' education or whatever their priorities might be. Then we talk about, what if you can't afford your payment? I'm going to spend 1 minute formulaically talking about how the payment's calculated, and we'll see that this shouldn't be a problem. Okay. Folks will say, I can't afford my loan payment. If they're in the income-driven repayment system, and let's pretend they picked Save, because that's now becoming the most popular repayment. What Save does is Save takes the number that would be on line 11 of their tax return, takes their AGI, and it lets the provider subtract out 2.25 of the poverty line for their family size. So let's pretend that we were talking about a resident who had an adjusted gross income of $60,000. That resident might be subtracting $45,000. Poverty line's about 20 times 2.25 is 45. So that resident who taxable income of 60 and discretionary income, taxable income minus 2.25 of the poverty line is only $15,000. In Save, depending on whether the loan is from med school or undergrad, we're then talking about paying 5 or 10% of that number back over the course of a year. So 15,000 to, times 10% might be $1,500. Divided by 12, we might be talking about $125 a month. Even if the debt was $800,000, $125 payment tells me that we can probably call a payment affordable if you're making 60 grand, $100 a month, $125 a month is probably a conversation we can have about fitting in the budget. Now, if that physician has finished training and their payments are still $125, even better. Now they have their total, family income as an attending physician, still a low payment until their next income verification, pulls their most recent tax return, and the payment's recalculated to higher numbers. Now, the reason I say that I care so much about this $100 payment is if you're in PSLF and you can get payments to count for $100 a month, you want every single one you can get to count. On the back end, if you have a year of forbearance that you requested because you couldn't afford your payment, you're going to trade $100 a month payments for $2,000 a month payments 10 years from now, or $3,000 a month, or whatever it might be. The cost of requesting forbearance for a physician doing PSLF can be significant. So I really want to highlight we don't like to do a lot of that. When you're a resident with less than 84 months, and in some cases 48 months left in training, you can also refinance your debt. So in the last several weeks, I've talked to 2 folks that are entering orthopedic surgery residencies, one in Pittsburgh, one in Philadelphia. And the conversations we've had have been, let's get set up as if you're going through PSLF. But each of them had a little bit of private debt, money that wasn't in the federal program. Groups like SoFi, groups like Laurel Road will let a physician refinance their private debt. Credit score is going to play a big role in pricing, but they'll let you refinance your private debt. And when you refinance your private debt, you only have to pay $100 a month during training. So if you do the residency specific programs, these folks might have 30,000, they might have 200,000 of private debt. But if you can protect your budget as a resident, only pay $100 a month, that can go a long way. Now, I caution if someone, even if they know they're taking over their dad's private practice one day, I caution from refinancing federal debt. And the reason I say that, there's a ton of federal debt advantages out there. One, if you leave the federal debt system, can never go back, so PSLF is forever off the table. 2, if you're in the repayment plan I was talking about a few minutes ago called Save, remember how low that payment was, $100, $125 for our example? All unpaid interest is subsidized by the government. So if you have a $300,000 loan and you're only paying $100 a month, the government's subsidizing the rest of the interest. If you refinance that loan, you're not going to get private banks to say, you know what, don't worry about the interest. We're not going to add it onto your loan. keep that money yours, right? Federal government program for subsidized interest through SAVE is a really meaningful thing. So what we don't want to see is folks refinance federal debt during their training. We want to see them take their private loans, maybe from Sallie Mae, or maybe the school granted them a loan, something like that. We'd want to see them refinance those. Right now, in the market we're in, the interest rates I'm seeing are a little bit above what a lot of folks have as their existing loan. So sometimes they're between a rock and a hard place where they say, do I want to pay $500 or $600 a month on my private loan during training? Or do I want to let the interest rate crawl up maybe 1% and only have to pay $100 a month? If rates do fall in the future, they can refinance it again and get a better rate. But where we sit right now, I'm seeing a lot of folks pick between a slight increase in interest rate and getting to only pay $100 a month, or keeping maybe a slightly lower interest rate from when they borrowed the money 4 years ago. But then they have to service the debt, hundreds a month, and sometimes the budget's tight at that stage. So I want to be clear about the private programs. I think SoFi and Rural Roads are worth knowing more about. The stark difference I've seen, and I don't want to say this is a blanket statement for all private, but most of the refinanced loans I've seen from Laurel Road have the loan begin its amortization. So let's say the resident is paying $100 a month, and then they have to start making big payments to pay the loan off after training. Most of the programs that I've seen from Laurel Road have those higher amortized loan payments start in July after finishing training. My experience as doctors, the July they finish training, don't have a lot of money. They don't have a paycheck. Maybe they don't get their signing bonus until their first paycheck. Maybe there's no relocation money yet. Maybe they didn't get a residency stipend. Maybe they have board and interview and moving expenses, first and last month rent. Like I said, no paycheck. That's not a good month to have payments rise. Typically, what I've seen from the SoFi program is that those payments start 5-6 months after finishing training. So I'm not going to say pick one or pick the other. I'm just going to say that the loan packets will clearly tell you when the payments go from $100 a month to when the amortization schedule begins. And you want that date to not be the day you finish residency or fellowship. That can be a very expensive time. We don't want to add more bills or higher bills then. So important to note about when those things happen. We'll talk about deciding what to do. This is a hypothetical example. I want to be cautious. I don't want anyone to try to memorize the whole slide. All I want to do is point out, if we had an internal medicine resident with 300 in debt and their income went from 0 med school, 30 because they trained from July to December, 60 January through December, half PGY1, half PGY2, and then maybe half PGY 2 or 3, they start making money, and then PGY3 again. And they're an attending, maybe making 250, and then, half a year as a resident, half as an attending, then attending income, right? If they go through that process and they have 300 in loans, they're going to see their loan values actually go up because their loan payments based on their income are small. So at its core, maybe that doctor, with no advanced strategies used, maybe that doctor paid $145,000 to get rid of 360 of their debt. PSLF sounds great, right? If they just paid the loan off at 6%, maybe it cost them $365,000, $363,000. If they were lucky enough to refinance for a low rate, maybe a couple of years ago when rates were lower, maybe they got rid of it for $330 and they saved $30,000 over the payoff. What I encourage doctors to do, and we'll talk about some examples, what I encourage doctors to do, though, is I try to get them to live as if they actually owe the money in the self-pay columns. Now, sometimes there's too much on the to-do list or whatever it might be for their family planning to do that. But if I can, it's really meaningful. It's nice not to feel handcuffed to an institution exclusively because of this delta. If I leave, I have to pay $360 instead of $145 for my debt. right? It's nice to not feel completely handcuffed for that. Number one. Number two, life changes. What if your group closes? What if they shut down? What if the hospital has changes? What if you have issues at work? What if you can only work half time and you can't get a form signed for 30 hours a week? What if you go through burnout? What if, right? Things change. And this is a 10-year program that if you only see a bunch of the way through, you don't get a prorated forgiveness. Okay. You owe the money. So if I can get doctors to live off the difference, in other words, act like they're spending all three or 3,300 on loans, only actually pay what's due, live off the difference between their income and the 3,300, as opposed to the difference between their income and this payment. That's going to help in a lot of ways. One, as this payment goes up, they're actually budgetarily prepared for it. Two, they can take that money and put it in a backup account, right? And what if things do change and they say, okay, not only as a result of things changing, can I afford the payment that I owe to start paying my loans off? But also, I have some money saved that I can put away, a big lump sum, and help get rid of my loan. So I encourage physicians typically to be conservative, to budgetarily act like they owe the whole thing. We can talk about all the ways in the world to reduce what they actually pay on their way to PSLF. But when deciding what to do, I really want them to budget as if they owe the whole thing. And again, it may not be that everyone can do that, but if they can, especially if we get to them before they bought the nice car, join the one country club, join the second country club because they like the pool better than over there, and then the third one because the chef from the first one went to the third one and they missed the marinara sauce. We can get to them before the spending piles up. This can go a long way to protecting them through the PSLF process. Now, I want to talk about mortgages for a minute. Banks love to have doctors as clients. I think most professions love to have doctors as clients, but banks love to have doctors as clients, and they want the deposit relationship and they want the direct deposit of the paycheck. So a lot of banks will say, you can buy a house, we'll finance it. And a lot of them will say for up to $1 million payment or purchase, you don't owe a down payment. And even if you don't make a down payment, we're not going to charge you PMI. Okay. A lot of banks will do that. And I've been asked at a lot of lectures lately, interest rates are up. Doesn't that feel like a waste of money if we're going to finance at 7.5% or whatever the number is? And to be perfectly honest, I want doctors to understand what recasting a mortgage means. It's not part of everybody's vocabulary. And I think it's a very important question for them to ask their mortgage brokers or bankers. If they can go to a bank and still get that zero down, and they can finance the whole thing and not have PMI and not pay an increased interest rate. Some banks do charge 1/8% higher or different amounts, but no increase in rate. If they can get that deal, think about the doctor who just finished training and think about how much more money they have 12 months later, 24 months later, 36 months later, compared to what they have right at the beginning, okay? You can, with some banks, and that's why we ask about recasting, you can make a down payment later. So you can save up money, get into the house, get the car handled, get the loan handled, pay for the wedding or the medical bills from starting a family, pay off the credit card, do whatever the to-do list is, or now moved into the house, you can make those couple repairs you need to make instead of staring at them every time you pull the car in the driveway. When what's supposed to be your sanctuary is just a financial to-do list, right? You can take care of all those things that are immediate. You can make a down payment later in a mortgage. They'll usually charge you an administrative fee, nothing too expensive. But then when you make that down payment later, they'll recast the loan, meaning they'll re-amortize it. It keeps the interest rate it had. It's not a refinance. This isn't a go get an appraisal. This isn't you have to be subjected to new interest rates. Just make a down payment later and then have that payment fit the rest of the financial plan budgetarily. And I think physicians know a lot more about their cash position. And Poe could probably tell you how many that he and my financial coach talked to. They probably know a lot more about their cash positions and how comfortable they are after 12, 24, 36, whatever paychecks than they do when they're trying to move and accept a job in a new city. So I think knowing that these programs exist allows us to spend less time on the break even of buying versus renting and this versus that. They can fall into a new loan payment that fits their long-term budget, but still secure the house that they wanted to get their family to the right neighborhood. So recasting is an important term to know for doctors. Credit scores we talk about on occasion when doctors are trying to refinance their student debt. Remember, there's no collateral here, right? So when you go to SoFi or Laurel Road and you say, give me $250,000, and if you don't pay them back, they can't just take your house. They can't just take your investment account, right? It's hard for them to collect the money. Now they know doctors pay their bills, but it's possible that a doctor sprained his or her ankle, junior year of undergrad. The bill for the ER visit got sent to a school mailbox. They lived off campus the next year, never got the bill, went to med school in another state, maybe another country, never got the bill. And all of a sudden they check their credit when they're going to get a car during training and they've got a 500 credit score and they're in collections, right? Entirely possible. Now, if those things happen, we want doctors to understand each element of their credit score. And we want them to understand a few misconceptions. Folks that are responsibly using their credit and paying their bills off monthly, believe it or not, more credit accounts helps, not hurts. Now, I was raised, a lot of credit accounts hurts. And I think people want you to know that because if you misuse a lot of credit accounts, it really hurts. But more accounts is actually highly correlated with a better score. View it like any pool of data you're looking at. More entries in the pool of data, and the longer the pool of data has existed, the more reliable a conclusion you're drawing from that pool of data might be. So a wider range of accounts for a longer time period both assign validity to the rest of the elements of the credit score, and the rest of the elements are evaluating you. Are you overextended? Have you gotten in any credit trouble? Have you paid 100% of the time or close to it? And then have you asked to borrow a bunch of new money, right? If the rest of those are answered favorably and the pool of data is both wide and deep, then your score is going to be optimized. One of the ways you can cheat a little bit, I probably shouldn't be saying cheat on a recorded Zoom, but here we are. One of the ways you can cheat a little bit is if your parents or grandparents or someone who has a wonderful credit history on even just one account, if they add you as an authorized user to that account and that account has some activity, that account is actually going to be copy and pasted from their credit report onto yours. Nothing will, and that's not true across all banks, but most. Nothing from your report goes to theirs. There's no reciprocity here. No bad items from their report go to yours. Just that one account. So I was added to my parents' Macy's account. Now, I'm willing to bet, based on how old it was, that it was a Horns or a Kaufman's or a Lazarus or something account that became Macy's at some point. But I'm 36 and I have 39 years of credit history. So my history is artificially improved based on being added to this account. And we didn't even do it because it was a strategy. I'm sure they just didn't want to bother taking me to the mall to buy a shirt for homecoming or a job interview or something in high school. At some point added me to it, or maybe there was a perk or a discount to add me to it. At some point in high school, I was added to this account, but now that account is a gem on my credit report. So important to know that that's out there and that can be done. When we talk about saving for the future, I want physicians to understand that taxes probably mean as much on their long-term results as anything. So the location of their money in the tax code is quite important. And then we want to talk about allocation and diversification as well. It's really easy and popular to get caught up in a story about passive profits on buying real estate property, or caught up in a story about how much tech stocks have went up last year. But it's really prudent to allocate your money based on risk and long-term or short-term objective. No risk on short-term money. A money market right now, it's June 5th. A money market right now might be paying 5.1, 5.2%. You don't need to take risk to get better short-term returns. That's good enough. We take some risk when we have longer term objectives because we can deal with the variability and the standard deviation of the stock market over a long time period. It's very important to be able to picture allocating money according to risk and then diversifying. Diversifying money is just us trying to say the account could move slower than if you guessed right and bought NVIDIA on the perfect day. But the results are going to be much more predictable and much more in line with the market at large and much more in line with your targeted return if you own a whole basket of stocks rather than just one. Now, I often talk about usable diversification. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to go buy an asset allocation fund. Checks the box, you picked your risk. Checks the box, it spread the money out. Or a target date fund does the same thing. But when you go to withdraw money from an asset allocation fund or a target date fund, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater in many occasions because it takes your US stock, your foreign stock, your large cap, your small cap, your utilities and your tech stock, your bonds, your cash, your real estate, your commodities. It takes all those things that you knew to diversify and own, and it mashes them together in one ticker symbol. So in March of 2020, instead of redeeming maybe commodities that were going up, your withdrawal was maybe 3% commodities because the fund holds 3% commodities and 70% stock or 50% stock. So you're still selling low right in the middle of a market crash. And so when we talk about these protocols of locate your money into tax-friendly places, and we talk about allocate and align risk with return objective and time horizon, and we talk about diversification, owning all these different things, we need to make sure we're not just hitting easy buttons, closing our eyes and pretending it's all working. There's a usability test when you go to take the money out as a retiree. Now, in your 401k or your 403b at work, if you're in a target date fund for the time being, that's not an issue because you can take that fund and subdivide it when you go to retire, right? You move it to an IRA and then you own each of those things separately, and then you're usably diversified. But if you're doing that in an account that's not tax sheltered, you're going to have to sell it out of the whole thing at once and pay the unrealized gains, pay capital gains tax and all the unrealized gains off, the lifetime growth of that fund just to have it buyer trifurcated into usable pieces, or it's just not going to be buyer trifurcated and we'll sell stocks with bonds and bonds with stocks regardless of market conditions. So I really wanted to spend a minute pointing out that these are key fundamentals, but how you use them matters. And then I always give this chart. Some folks can screen grab it or whatever if they want, but line number 1 is typically your non-qualified or your brokerage account, how it's taxed. Line number 2 is typically your 401k, 403b at work, pre-tax contributions. Make you smile now, you cry a little bit in retirement with income tax due on all your withdrawals. Line 4, I'm skipping 3, is typically your Roth. No real incentive now, but boy, that tax-free growth and withdrawal later means a lot. And then line 3 is going to be a non-deductible IRA. There are also some insurance products that can live in line number 3 and help. If it's a non-deductible IRA, you're not very liquid. Some insurance products can be liquid though. But just important to be able to pictorially see, you're going to gravitate towards smiley faces, right? Tax shelters and liquidity mean a lot. You can't go all tax shelters and have no liquidity. But when you go tax shelters, it's really nice to optimize retirement plans at work, retirement plans on your own, and then some additional tools that maybe a hospital institution has that can lower income. And a commercial for that, if you're lowering income or if you offer plans that lower income for physicians, that takes you all the way back to that calculation I did about their debt. And remember, 10% of their income is going to student loan debt. So if you have certain programs at work that might let the physician lower their income by 10 grand, it's $1,000 off their debt. Lower their income by 20, by 30, by 40, by 50. thousands and thousands more that they don't have to pay on their way to PSLF each and every year. So very important to know what and where pre-tax contributions might be able to live for student loans pursuing PSLF. A couple quick notes and then we'll pause for questions. If we were doing the baseline value of PSLF and we just used the standard case, okay? Someone in their 20s and 30s, 10 years of repayment might be 399 grand on a few $100,000 student loan bill, 164 or 153 if the physician's in page burn or save. So just the baseline value, no advanced considerations, PSLF can move the needle by hundreds of thousands. Second one I want to show, if that physician files taxes on extension each year, they're making payments based on the blue lines instead of the yellow ones. So we can see noticeably lower costs as they go through the time periods of their loans just by living an extra year behind their income. They go through some big pay raises, income jumps a lot. If you capture an extra year of low instead of high, then you're always a year of inflation behind the loan payment. That's meaningful. Spousal income. If we are married, a physician to a pharmacist making 120, their payments in yellow. If they file a separate tax return, their payments in blue. So cutting away spousal wages means a lot. And then the high pay misconception, I was talking about this earlier, when you install a payment cap, even if someone has a small loan, in this case, we just showed if the loan was like 100 grand, and then we said they went from making 60 as their income here. It's nice having a payment cap and not having their payments jump to thousands a month, and they still get PSLF. So some concepts I talked about earlier I wanted to illustrate for you today. These can go a really long way to work. And the last one is in private practice. In private practice, if someone stays in save and files tax extension, their payments could be closer to zero, depending on what their AGI was, or very low, but also their interest isn't accruing. Eventually, their payments are going to get high enough that they're going to start making real income-driven repayments and their interest isn't in subsidy anymore. But that's a lot easier for getting life started than these yellow sections if they don't file tax extensions or if they privately refinance and make payments the whole time. So no interest and very low to no payment if they know how to use save and use save appropriately. So when you're hiring physicians and grooming or mentoring, some things to know, it's not just for private or for nonprofit that these government programs help. And also it's very important to see what can be done. I'm going to leave this slide up for the tying it together and pause for questions.
Thank you very much for presenting today, Chris. As mentioned in the chat, you can find the chat in the bottom along the menu. We did have a question come in asking, you touched on taxes briefly. Did you want to speak a little bit more about tax strategies regarding student loans, please?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we want to know if we're pursuing PSLF or some form of forgiveness or interest subsidy, lower income, lower taxes means that we're going to have less cash outflow towards the loan, capture more subsidy, capture more forgiveness. So we're essentially looking at lowering income. That said, if you file taxes separately, you want to be mindful that that can cause an increase in total taxes paid. And you'll compare the loan savings to the tax savings. And that's really where we say working with professionals means a lot. Knowing folks at My Financial Coach or knowing a good CPA and having them talk to each other on your behalf, that means a lot. But usually it's the key strategies are filing separately from spouse, if like in that pharmacist example from the case study, or filing on extension. Sometimes it's funding pre-tax investments at work. Sometimes those are certain executive benefit plans, sometimes 401k, 403b. all very important ways to lower income. But essentially what we're looking at is lowering taxable income to then create a lower payment that's derived from a multiplication problem as a percentage of taxable income.
Okay, we had another question come in asking if you had any strategies or sources of information for loans that are currently over 20 years old. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so it would depend on the loan and the loan program, but if we're at 20 but not yet 25 years, a lot of these loans are going to be forgiven and forgiven automatically. We need to be very cautious about whether we have the cash on hand to pay the tax for that forgiveness, right? If it's a long-term forgiveness and the loan is forgiven, then we have to be aware that a 1099 can show up, and that's a big income tax bill depending on the size of the loan, but it's added to your taxable income. So I would say if someone's going through that personally, it's probably a really good idea to just ping me offline, connect with us through AAPL or through my financial coach, and let me take a MRI with contrast on that loan and speak to it specifically. But in the SAVE program, the loan is forgiven automatically at year 25. In the revised pay as you earn, it was year 25 as well. In pay as you earn, the loan is forgiven at year 20. And I see the follow-up question. In PSLF, there's an active form you submit. In SAVE, sorry, maybe everyone doesn't see the chat. The follow-up question was, how do you get the loan forgiveness? In PSLF, there's a form you submit. In SAVE and pay as you earn, which are used for PSLF, but when you apply those to long-term forgiveness, there's a process with the servicer where you can request and you can find out how far you are on track towards it, or you can request for them to postpone forgiveness because you can't afford the tax. So that would be working with the servicer. In SAVE, it's supposed to be built where they can just automatically do it. Just like in SAVE, they can automatically forgive folks who borrowed less than $12,000, which is a new wrinkle. Not a lot of med students in that wrinkle, but a new wrinkle. Those are supposed to become automated, but I would argue that the servicers aren't quite caught up to that yet. Other questions?
Yeah, we had another question come in mentioning Roth IRAs and backdoor Roth IRAs and how important it is to lower AGI. Did you want to explain some additional details about tax advantages, tax strategies, and loan repayments, specifically regarding Roth IRA conversions?
Yes. So a Roth IRA conversion is almost always still a really good idea for residents, fellows, and early career physicians. A lot of times what I see is they max out their Roth during training if they can. If they can't, it's okay. In January of the year that they're finishing training, they have to stop funding it. And they probably have to start doing backdoor Roth, which is just a way to do essentially max out a Roth by the money traveling through another IRA first. So if you go back to my smiley faces, money goes to account number 3 and then gets moved into account number 4. We do want to disclose if you have other IRAs, a backdoor Roth is to be proceeded with caution. Can accidentally trigger tax from your other IRAs, but a backdoor Roth is still a very good idea. And then when residents are finishing, or even while they're at their training program, if they have pre-tax balances in their 403Bs or 401Ks or 401As, whatever tool they have, if they have pre-tax balances, a lot of times we're converting those to Roth as well. In some programs like UPMC in Pittsburgh, we can log in while they're still in training and convert the employer match to Roth. So we can do it each year instead of a big one all at once. The reality though is Roth conversions, if they're from pre-tax money, can increase the loan payment. I still feel like it's a good thing, depending on the exact balance, but still a good thing for most early career physicians, residents, fellows, and those that are first year post-training, or those in that transition year from residency and fellowship to attending. A lot of times we're not touching dirty tax brackets yet. So I'll take the conversion even if there's an increase, in a small increase in the loan payment. I don't want to say that that's universal, but for many, yes. And I agree with the comment in there where really thinking about Roth is critical. And then if your AGI is too high, maybe just make it so you don't have any IRAs at all. And if you have no IRAs, maybe we go back to revisiting doing backdoor Roth. Other questions?
It looks like we don't have any more questions. Well, I think we will go ahead and wrap it up for today. Once again, thank you very much, Chris, for presenting today. Chris is one of our subject matter experts through My Financial Coach. I've just left some information in the chat. You can reach out to us at customerservice@myfinancialcoach.com if you're interested in working with Chris and getting solutions for your individual situation. Thank you again, everyone, for attending today. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Did you have any final words, Chris?
Nope, it's recorded, so I got to make sure my disclosure hits before I hang up.
Okay, all right.
Thank
Yeah.
you, everybody. I appreciate your time and attention and good questions. Thank you.